Cool. Welcome back to episode 7. Today we are talking about validation architecture and what your schema validation should be, right? Think of it this way. If you have one schema, which is the source of truth, your app just works. All you got to do is add a type check hook on your git commit, and your LLM return code will never break. Your agent will always check why it's not committing because there is type check which is failing. It will fix that, right? How do you do that? Just use one schema file on the server. That schema file comes to the Open API spec. Open API spec generates it for you, and you never have to write the schema ever yourself. Handwritten schemas are a lie, right? Because if you handwrite something, then the server schema could drift, and then your API will not work in production and it will break. That's it. Don't do that, right? Just have one schema, right? One schema that can be extended to anything, right? Always have schema first. Always be schema first. If you have a backend schema, a function in the backend that is using, or an API call in the backend that is using that schema, make sure the Open API spec just exports that schema and you're done. That's it. That's it. Always use that schema on your UI, right? Uh, think of this way. If your schema comes from the API, now you know what your read schema is and what the write for any function is, right? If you know what the write for any function is, then you know what the validation for a form is, right? If you know what the validation for a form is, you know what the URL params are, and you know the schema that you have to use for your local storage or an external data, right? The important bit is, even if you, let's say, tomorrow want to create a new type or a new interface on the UI, right? You should never duplicate anything, right? For example, there is a base schema where every object has ID and created at, right? That is the basic thing. I mean, I would extend it to say every object will have ID, created at, updated at, and maybe a name for that entity, right? Name is, again, we can remove name, but let's, for the sake of this discussion, keep it, right? Then your interface, any new interface, should not duplicate it, should just extend it. For example, in this case, the base schema is ID and created at, then the user schema maybe just needs to add the name, and it is extended from the base schema. The good thing about it is that now if your API schema for some reason needs to be extended on the front end, right? If you duplicate that API schema tomorrow, if you duplicate that API schema and rewrite the whole thing as a new interface, the backend could drift. But tomorrow, if you have extended and the backend wants to drift, your front end will not build and you stop before pushing that code to production. Always extend schemas. That's it. Keep that in mind. Have one source of truth and always extend base schema. Never do this. Never handwrite types. Okay. If you have to, make sure they are extended from base types. Never use casting as use think of this as this schema. That is incorrect. If that is happening, then you don't have strict types in your code base, and that is wrong. Never use any, because you would fix it later. It never happens. Nobody ever fixes anything later. Don't use any. And never skip validation on trusted sources. Even if you are using a trusted third party API, even if it's your own company or own backend service, you should have a validation on every API call. End of story, right? Cool. That was pretty much it for this episode. We'll meet again in the next episode. Thank you.